Hey everyone, my name's Kelsey, and I just want to say welcome to my channel. Here I'm going to be discussing true crime cases where I'll be going into some of the details of the crazy, gruesome, and heartbreaking cases that are out there today. I do, though, want to give a brief warning that today's story is going to be a difficult story to listen to. There is talk of kidnapping, torture, and rape. If this is not something you're going to be, that you're comfortable with and going to be able to listen to, I completely understand. I also want to apologize for the names or places that I may go on to mispronounce ahead of time. Don't come for me in the comments. I did really try with this case, so just bear with me on that. But we will go ahead and just jump in today's case. In May of 1999, a very distraught and scared 14-year-old girl would walk into a police station in Hong Kong and tell officers about a ghost that had been haunting her for several weeks now. Obviously, officers were confused at first, not sure why she was coming to them to discuss a haunting, but she would go on to explain that the ghost who was haunting her would be the same woman she would admit to having a hand in murdering just weeks earlier. Truthfully, though, even after hearing that, the officers still didn't really know what to believe. They honestly thought she was on drugs because her story was a bit unusual and not what they're normally used to hearing or having reported to them. But she would take these officers to a flat on Granville Road in Sim Sha Su, where she would walk the officers down a hallway leading to a bedroom decorated in nothing but Hello Kitty items. And it would look just like a little girl's room. But in that room, she would show them a Hello Kitty mermaid plush doll, and it's what would be inside the doll that would truly shock the officers. It would be the skull of the woman she claimed that was haunting her. So you may have heard of today's story already, but if not, we are going to be diving into Fan Man-yee's story and what awful, sick, and twisted things this poor woman would suffer in the flat by the hands of three deranged men and a young girl who, in those moments, had no remorse for human life. Fan was born in 1976. The life she lived before her tragic end, it was marked by hardship and loss from just the very beginning. She would be abandoned by her family and raised in a girl's home. Sadly, as she would become a teenager, though, the girl's home would tell Fan that she would have to leave due to her age. Apparently, the home would have a rule that once she reached a certain age, you would age out of the home. At just the age of 15, she would become homeless with nowhere to go or anyone to turn to. And sadly, most girls who experience what Fan would go through, she would turn to prostitution just to make it. She would turn to that as her way to, buy her necessities that she needed, food, things like that, just to kind of take care of herself, made sure she had what she needed. It was also stated that she would turn to drugs as well. And this was probably to help her cope with the situation she was dealt at such a young age. Though, could you just imagine turning 15 and being told to leave the only place and people you knew? I couldn't imagine how confused and lost she probably felt in this moment. Those were the only people she, probably knew of, and the only place that she probably thought of as home in some way. I couldn't find much more about Fan's teenage years, though, going into her adulthood, unfortunately. So I will have to skip ahead into her early 20s. So I'm going to just kind of dive in with where I was able to pick up on my research. At age 21, she would meet a man, and his name was Ning Sha Yun. He was a fellow addict and one of her normal customers at the nightclub she worked at. And they would go on and marry, and 2 years into their marriage, Fan would give birth to their son in November of 1998. And roughly, that was just 5 months before her tragic murder. It was said, though, that Fan's husband was abusive, and her neighbors would report being woke up in the middle of the night to the sounds of the couple fighting and the child screaming. I couldn't imagine what that poor baby had went through and what all he had to listen to. But, Fan would be able to find the courage to eventually leave her abusive husband. She did want to get clean and live a better life for her and her son. And the only way she knew that she could honestly do that was to live an honest life for her and her child, was to get out of that situation with her abusive husband. But during the time that she worked at the nightclub, unfortunately, she would go on to meet a man named Chan Man Luke, and this would forever change her life. He was a member of the Wuxing Wu trade, and that is one of the oldest gangs in Hong Kong. He was a local drug dealer and a pimp. He would become one of Fan's usual clients. And it was said that during one of their encounters at the nightclub, that Fan stole a wallet containing 4,000 Hong Kong dollars from Chan. Which, if you're like me and you don't know what that's equivalent to in US dollars, that is a little over $500. Chan would confront her, and she would go on to return the $4,000 back to him, but he would go on to demand an additional $10,000 as well. Obviously, she would need additional time to secure the rest of the fee that Chan demanded. She didn't have $4,000, which is why she took it, and know that probably was not the smart way to go about it for her, but she was hard up and confused and didn't know where to go. And Chan knew there was no way she would be able to pay the $10,000. It was almost like he was setting her up for what would go on to take place later on. Though not long after Chan demanded that $10,000 fee, Fan would be lured from her home by Chan's 14-year-old girlfriend, Afong. And when Fan would step outside, she would be kidnapped by two of Chan's accomplices, Ling Wai Lun and Ling Xing Ko. And sadly, they would take her to a flat that Chan was staying at, and to make her repay the debt, Chan was going to pimp her out at first, but would go on to change his mind, and instead they would brutally torture and rape her for almost a month. And according to one source, she was beaten with metal bars, sometimes while being strung up, and used as a punching bag. And it was said that she was kicked in the head about 50 times. I'm shocked she was even still able to live after being kicked in the head like that. Couldn't imagine with the force each of them had, kicking her in the head, that she was even still be able to live through that. She was starved and made to eat feces and drink urine. Spices were rubbed into her wounds. It also said that her legs and feet were burned with candle wax and hot plastic, so she couldn't move around in the flat or try to escape. They made it to where she would become completely confined to this room. And the one part that really got to me, obviously outside of all the abuse that she was put through, was Fan was forced to smile and say she enjoyed it. And if she refused, they would subject her to harsher torture. They literally wanted to break her in every way they could. She was a new mom, had just had the courage to leave her abusive husband, trying to get clean with hopes of starting a new life for her and her son. This just completely broke my heart for Fan, as I'm a mother myself. She wouldn't even be able to be a part of her son's life as he was growing up. All those special moments we look forward to as parents, all the first, they would be stolen from her. Her abusers, rapists, and captors would completely take everything from her. Sadly, she would pass from the awful torture she had been subjected to. It was stated she would pass away somewhere between April 14th and April 15th of 1999 while her abusers were out. Upon them returning home, though, they would find Fan's lifeless body. To try to cover up the awful crimes they committed, they would dismember Fan's head and boiled it along with the rest of her remains. Once they boiled the skin completely off her skull, they would put it inside of that Hello Kitty mermaid plush doll, the one, the doll that was found in the flat in that Hello Kitty room where Afong, the 14-year-old I had mentioned earlier in the story, would take officers to. And they would put some of her body parts and organs in 3 different bags and scatter them around the flat where her murder took place. And I'm sure, in a flat, an apartment, your neighbors are going to hear and smell some of the things that are going on around the apartment. And I'm sure they heard Fan screaming, probably some of the hitting and stuff going on. And I'm sure they smelled some of the rotting body parts that were laying around. But with Chan being who he was, they weren't willing to come forth and report anything. And the other remaining body parts would be discovered in trash dumps in surrounding areas. Officers would, though, go on to arrest Chan, Afong, Ling Wai, and Ling Xing for the murder of Fan Man-yee. The 3 men would all be found guilty of manslaughter. They didn't have enough evidence to prove exactly what happened to Fan, except the word of Afong. The men said that Fan had come over and was taking drugs, and she must have overdosed on something she had taken while she was there. But, with the body being scattered and obviously it being found in the horrible condition it was in, they had no way of really proving how Fan had died. There wasn't really much testing they could do on what body parts and stuff they were able to find. Chan, the main predator, or I'm sorry, the main person in the overall kidnapping and torture of Fan, was sentenced to life in prison with parole after just, serving 20 years of his sentence. He is still serving time in prison for the murder of Fan, as far as I could find in the research that I was able to look into. Ling Hualun and Ling Xingko was sentenced to life as well, but Ling Shanko would later receive a reduced sentence of just 18 years on an appeal. So 8 years after he was released, Ling Shanko would be arrested again and sentenced to a year in jail, just a year. But that was due to a brave 10-year-old girl coming forth and telling officers how he sexually assaulted her. He should have never been released from prison from what he had done to Fan. His second charge and sentence would prove that. I hope and pray, though, that 10-year-old girl was able to find love, support, and help to get her through everything she had been through. If our justice system is not held accountable for their mistakes, then who can we put trust in them to keep, others held accountable for what they do wrong? Afong was, she did receive immunity in place of her testimony against Chan and his two accomplices. I really hate that she didn't receive any actual punishment for her part, but as they stated, without her testimony, it's uncertain if anyone would have figured out what happened to Fan and the whereabouts of her body. When no one is held accountable for their actions or part in the crimes they committed, there's no real hope for change, though. People have got to start being held accountable for what they do wrong. I know she was young, and that may have played a role in it. She may have been afraid of him, but still, people have got to be held accountable to some degree in the wrong and crimes they commit. But the flat where Fan was murdered was demolished in September of 2012. Fan's story is a very heartbreaking one, to say the least. It's still a very popular story, talked highly about in Hong Kong. Even though the flat was demolished, it doesn't take away the true memories of what happened there. She was so young and had a 5-month-old son she would never get to see grow up. She was trying to get her life back on track for him. It's truly sad at what a human being is capable of doing to another. I do, though, just want to say thank you so much for hanging out with me today, through this tragic case. It truly means more to me than you may ever know. If you have anyone else you all would like to see me cover, please just list your suggestions down below in the comments. And I will be reading those and going through them as well. I would also love to hear your all's opinions and thoughts down below as well about today's case. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video so you can continue to follow along with me. And please remember to be careful and stay safe. You honestly never know who people are anymore these days or what they're capable of. Hopefully, I'll catch you on the next video. Bye for now.